So this is going to be the ChessGoals recommended repertoire from the Classical 1 D4 course against the Albin Countergambit. And we're going to show two variations against this line. And this should be occurring in 2 or 3% of your overall games from the white perspective. So the lines we show are going to be slightly offbeat, but should give us a nice advantage out of the opening.
Yep, so first move, we're going to start just by taking the quote-unquote free e-pawn, and black is going to respond the mainline move, pushing past with d4. We're going to play the next book move, knight f3. This is considered mainline Albin Countergambit, is that right?
So far it's mainline. So now knight c6 is most common. And here's where we're throwing in the first move that's a little bit less popular. This is the fourth most popular move in the club database. Knight b to d2. So one kind of cool idea we have here is that knight might head to b3, trying to pick up this pawn right away. So we're delaying the development of this bishop a bit, and we're also allowing the bishop to b4 pin by playing knight b to d2. So in this position, we're going to look at two lines. We're going to look at bishop to g4 for black, and we're also going to look at knight g to e7. So let's start with bishop to g4. This is played in 9,000 games out of about, looks like 20,000, so most popular move. And now we are going to play a3. And here, take note of these two pieces on the black king side. What do you think of those guys?
Pretty sad looking pieces. They're not happy to be in their starting squares.
And black is also trying to win this pawn back on e4. So let's look at queen to e7. This follows in the spirit of the Albin Countergambit. They want to win this pawn back, and they're also thinking maybe we'll queenside castle. So now, kind of similar to what we saw with the Tarrasch, we're going to recommend a kingside fianchetto. It's so strong here that I would feel bad not recommending it, because that bishop on g2 will point long term all the way to the black queen side. And also we don't want to necessarily push this e3 pawn up, because there's that pawn on d4 just waiting to ruin our pawn structure. So we're going to go g3 here.
Yep, so g3, again, looking for this fianchetto. Black is going to castle long and protect this pawn, and we're going to continue with our development, get the bishop to its intended square. And now black is going to play to win the pawn back. Should we capture the knight?
Not yet. And if we look at the stats here, we love looking at the stats. Club level database, 160 games. White wins 66%, black wins 30%. So in practice, white is doing very well on this line. We're going to castle right now. We're not taking that knight on e5 right away. And we have ideas here of queen to b3, eyeing this b7 square with both the queen and the bishop. So there's some tactics that we need to look for. Black definitely needs to be aware of. So the main move is knight to f6. And now we're recommending queen to a4, which is the fourth most common move. But we have this immediate threat of the pawn on a7. King to b8. One thing I'll note there is if they were to play knight takes f3, we can take back with the e-pawn. And that simultaneously attacks the bishop on g4 and the pawn on a7. So king to b8. Now what do you think we should play here, Jesse, to keep some pressure going on the queen side?
Yeah, so I like the look of the move b4, just really expanding on the queen side here. Anytime there's opposite side castling, you should really consider these pawn pushes or pawn storms toward the enemy king.
And also, that dark square bishop needs to get into the game for us. He wants to head to the b2 square soon.
Yep.
So now let's look at knight takes f3. And here we have a very fun sequence if black goes for the pawn on e2. So we're going to offer this pawn on e2. It's very tempting to take it because black sees there's this passed d pawn. And keep in mind, we're in this position already where the stats are showing 66% to about 30% a couple moves earlier. So let's look at queen takes e2. And I'll play through these moves without a lot of commentary so you can just kind of see what could happen here. Rook e1, hitting the queen. Only one square, queen d3. Now we play knight e5, hitting the queen, hitting the bishop, hitting this pawn, Bishop's ready to come through, right? We got a lot of tactics in the air. Queen f5. Okay, makes sense. Retreat the queen, right? Look at this tactic, Jesse. Knight to c6 check. Free knight.
I don't understand it, but go on.
Okay, b takes c6. Queen takes c6. Yes. This is completely over for black. I'm turning on Stockfish. The eval is 8.6. What's going to happen is if king c8 is played, there's queen a6 check, king d7, bishop c6, king d6, bishop b5, and it's a forced mate sequence because we have the rook guarding the e file.
It's a fun win.
Yeah. So this is if black gets greedy by taking that pawn on e2. We have that very nice sequence. And that just shows kind of the power of the tactics in this position. So we took the Albin Countergambit. We know black wants to play aggressive. They're going to queenside castle. We did a kingside fianchetto to counter that with a g2 bishop cutting across the board. And we got a lot of play because of that bishop and because of our quick development.
Yeah, the light score bishop is MVP of that game.
Yes, I agree. So now let's look at one other line. Knight g to e7. So keeping some consistency here, we're going to recommend a3 again. So kind of a simple a3. Knight g6, trying to win this pawn back. And now here we're recommending that we go for this pawn on d4 with knight to b3.
Yep, so now we have 3 attackers on this pawn. So black is going to capture our e-pawn. We're going to recapture their knight. This is kind of like a forced sequence that works in our favor. They will capture back, and now we're going to capture the d-pawn with our queen.
Yeah, so at first you might think this looks drawish, right? Why are we just trading off everything in the center? After queen takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes c4, pawns are even, bishops are even, knights are even. Where are the imbalances here? If you look at the stats, we're in a scenario where we got 63% win, 28% loss. If you look at Stockfish, we already have a +1 eval here. And it's because we're going to come at black with very quick development. And there's going to be tactical problems. If black makes one slip up, the game might already be lost. So we're recommending e4 here. Immediately hitting the knight. Knight d6, most common move. And now we're going to attack the knight again, e5. We'll follow the most popular move with knight f5. And here we have a really nice way to keep the pressure going. Knight to b5, hitting this pawn on c7. And there's no bishop to d6 because our pawn defends it. So the best move for black, the most popular move by far, king to d8. And now we can hit black with bishop to g5 check. So you can see, even though the queens are off the board, one minor piece is off the board, pawns are even, we can actually come at black very quickly with an attack. You know, +1 Stockfish eval in a position that looks drawish is a very dangerous thing for the opponent.
Yeah, so tricky lines here. Can we follow this a little further?
Yeah, definitely. So
yes,
bishop e7, go ahead.
And we take here. And so they can't take with the king because they drop the c-pawn. So if they take with the knight, oh, I see, we can check. Yeah, that's going to be a trick. So now black is in a big bind. Okay, I see. And then we can play the bishop out. And even actually a cool move here is we could castle with check.
Yeah, I like this line a lot. And bishop c4 next, right? So
Yeah.
It's like we have this kind of nagging pressure where we're up a pawn. So that's going to be our recommendation against the Albin Countergambit. I think these lines are pretty straightforward. We avoid a lot of the craziness that black has at their disposal. In line number 2, as we've seen here, we traded off queens and gone for this endgame advantage. Line number 1, we let them have their queenside castling fun. But we put the bishop on g2. We're ready for them.